Hey, I'm Dave March, and welcome to Land of Confusion, the Ricochet show for members, by members, where we interview members. And here's my co-host.
I'm Don Tillman here, Palo Alto. Welcome. And who do we have today?
We have Dr. Bastiat today.
Excellent.
Hello, everybody.
Okay. So we were just talking
I'm not seeing this. Oh, there we go. Okay.
So we were just talking about stuff that was happening in Canada because our media here in Canada gaslighted the population about the recent COVID protest. They claim there was only 200 people there, but when you watch the actual footage, it's like 4,000 or 5,000 people showed up.
That's the media. That's how it works. Who was I think it's the pundit where they said that the job of the media is to cover a story with a pillow until it stops moving.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that Glenn Reynolds? Was that or Ace
That's him.
Spade? Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't remember.
Well, actually, he was quoting someone else.
I think it was Ace of Spade or I don't know. I should have brought up.
He was quoting someone else, but it's a great quote. And he.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't heard from Ace of Spades since the Trump 2016 kind of podcast I was following, and then one day he's like, "I'm all in for Trump. Screw this. Can't stand it anymore." And then he disappeared.
Yeah, you're right. I haven't seen him.
Yeah. So
It might have been quoting Iowa Hawk.
I think you're right. I think you're right. Yep.
And I love Iowa Hawk.
Yeah.
He's fantastic.
Yeah.
It's just remarkable. His Twitter account was hacked recently, and he's back online again. He does this wonderful thing. And you heard about this Dave's car ID service?
No.
Okay, he's a fan of cars, and he can old cars, sports cars, all sorts of cars, historic cars, and people started sending in photographs of old cars, and he would identify them. Oh, it's a 1948 Oldsmobile Cutlass. It's just he'd as a Studebaker Hawk from 1962, and people would send him more and more of these photographs, and they got odder and odder because they would be in like horrible states of disrepair. It might be just like half the engine block left over, and he would identify it from that. It's just the most amazing thing. And apparently he's going to turn into a coffee table book or something soon.
Cool.
So that's his that's on his Twitter feed, Iowa Hawk blog.
Okay.
Highly recommended.
Yeah. So,
but is that way we want to start out the show? Oh, why not?
Yeah, why not? We tend to ramble. That sounds a great way. So I see that you were born on an Air Force base in New York.
Yeah, that's right, in Plattsburgh, New York, during Vietnam. Then my sister was born in Goose Bay, Labrador, on the Air Force base up there.
Okay.
So they moved us to all the best places.
So I take it your father was in the Army then, or Air Force?
He was Air Force, yeah, and got out after the war. So I was a young child. I don't really remember any of it. My earliest memory is from Goose Bay. It was a bomber base on the Great Circle routes where they fly to Europe and refuel and all that. And all the B-52s, the 4 motors on each wing, I think. And they would do drills and they'd light them all up at once. And they'd start all these bombers as if there was a big bombing raid. And our whole house would shake, and the dishes, my mother's cabinets would shake, and it just scared the crap out of me. I'd go hide under my mom's bed.
Yep.
So I remember that. That's really the only thing I remember about Goose Bay.
You said Labrador, right? Was that as in Canada?
Yep.
As in Canada, that's right. Yeah. So we were based up there, and my mom was on a curling team. They lived the Labrador experience for a year or two.
What's that like? Just curious.
I don't know. We moved to Ohio when I was 4, I think. So
okay.
I really don't remember any of this except being scared by the bomb.
So you grew up on a hog farm in an Amish community?
Yeah. We did a lot of field work with horses, and I had a very boring childhood watching 2 horses' butts walk around in circles all day long. And learned how to work hard. I was very fortunate to grow up in that manner. You know, my parents are both very bright, and they both worked very hard. And I think one way to success in life is learning how to do monotonous labor very well, because most of us do is very monotonous. Even exciting jobs. I mean, like I have a pretty cool job, but a lot of it's repetitive, and people that don't do as well with that struggle, I think. So it was a great way to grow up. But of course, at the time, I wanted to skateboard. You know.
Yeah.
But no, it was a good. I have no complaints. We lost our farm when I was 16. We lost everything, and so we kind of had a rough go there for a while, which. In retrospect was probably it was a good thing, definitely, but at the time it stung a bit. Yeah, so and then my parents taught school. They were very, very good at it, won Teacher of the Year over and over again. And now my dad is retired down here close to me, and I live in Hilton Head and he's in Bluffton.
Okay.
All right.
So, yeah, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah. Sort of. I mean, it's everybody says, "Wow, Amish farm, that's really cool. That's amazing. That's so awesome." Yeah, I'm thinking you have no idea.
Yeah.
I mean, it's, you know, it's very monotonous and very, you know, first thing you do the chores, then you harness the horses, then you hook up whatever equipment, then you fix the equipment because you just broke it because it's 150 years old because it's, you know, horse-drawn equipment. You know, and it's glamorous. I guess it's glamorous from the outside, but I mean. It's just bizarre to me that the people that go on vacation, they go up and drive around and look at Amish people, and these people do it with us too. We see these cars driving by on a dirt road going 2 miles per hour, watching us do the most boring work you've ever, you know. This is the best thing you come up and do with you on your vacation to entertain yourselves, to not even do boring work, but watch other people do boring. I just never understood it. Now I kind of see it. It's exotic and it's different and everything, but at the time I was just mystified.
Well, yeah, people love that, right? You know, it's like watching people Williamsburg. Was it old Williamsburg? Watching people churn butter.
Yeah. Right. All right,
That's
whatever
a
you
spectator
like.
sport.
Yeah, I remember I was at Fort Ticonderoga last year, coming back from visiting my girlfriend in New Brunswick, and just watching this guy trying to make breakfast, and it was just like a 2-hour ritual, and it was like, well, this has been interesting for 15 minutes, but I'm going to go do something else now.
Yeah, I need a McMuffin. You know?
Okay, so I'm going to guess, do you consider yourself like a actual classic liberal, full-on libertarian, conservative? Which one, where on the spectrum do you fall?
The classical liberal. I don't, you know, I like a lot of modern conservatives. I identify with a lot in the libertarian movement, but there's so much that just for some reason they have a way that when they run somebody for president, they choose these. I mean, nuts. So, you know, and
it's not just president.
I'm sure that's true. Yeah. So and I don't really understand the American libertarian movement because some of the libertarians I know are essentially communists, and others are more independent minded than I am, and I can't figure out the link between them. So I don't really consider myself libertarian, partially because I don't understand it. But yeah, I fit a lot better with the classical liberals.
I
don't think they have an organizational structure going. I think that's one of the problems.
Yeah.
It's whoever wants to, you know, woohoo, I'll run.
The basic concept makes so much sense to me. I don't know. Now, part of it is, you know, I don't want to speak for libertarians because I don't present myself that way. But I mean, I think part of it is that, you know, like anything between two consenting adults is okay. And I don't think that's true. I mean, some things are wrong, you know. Perhaps that's the break in the link that I can't quite put my finger on. But yeah, there's something there that just. So yeah, I'm a modern conservative, classical liberal, however you would call that. The termination, it's hard to. There aren't a lot of good terms for this sort of thing.
Yeah, a friend of mine, he's in that kind of anarcho-communist libertarian space, and he'll post stuff on these attacking people who are on his side, essentially. And like, why are you attacking these people? You claim you're a libertarian, yet you're believing every terrible thing that your enemies are saying about your allies.
And see, to me, that's a great example. You know, anarcho-capitalist or anarcho-communist. I don't understand. You know, those two things don't go together. They're
I
polar
don't think it matters. I think.
Well, yeah.
I don't
You're
think
probably
they're
right.
particularly concerned about.
I'm thinking about it too
consistency.
much.
Yeah, there's some early science fiction that you can read that really describe how some of these societies work, and it's like, oof, that's a lot of. I don't think most people can handle that kind of like thought. It's like you are literally living in the Amish lifestyle in some ways. Like
I don't understand.
But I don't think they were too concerned with the consistency when they were picking out the words to use. I think that was the issue.
Well,
or the
you can read about these
implications,
guys' attempts at government if you go look at the end of World War I, where some of these guys started to set up and have control of countries for a little while. It's fun.
Yeah. Oh, the Ottoman Empire is a mess. Watch this.
Mm-hmm. Yep. What is it? Yeah. So classical liberalism. Sorry, just having a moment.
We love these moments.
Yeah. So why don't we talk about you did 4 years of research on canine genetics, and then suddenly you're now in family medicine and clinical lipidology.
Right. So yeah, in college I did 4 years of research on. I was trying to find a blood test between coyotes and dogs, and I was using electrophoresis. I was focusing to separate proteins and try to find, and honestly failed, probably because coyotes and dogs can interbreed, and I was picking up too much static. But anyway, I knew that I wanted to go to medical school. The whole reason I went to college was to go to medical school, and I knew that I was a white male, and I knew I'd better have something. So I worked really hard on this research, getting as many publications as I could and everything. And my college load, I went to a small college, and they didn't get a lot of research out, so they would buy me really nice equipment, and I was their boy for a while. So and it worked out fine. That is probably how I got in medical school. But what's interesting is I learned a lot about. So electrophoresis is where you basically drag proteins across a gel, and it's like if you have almost like if you have a gravel pit and you've got these levels of screens, and you shake the rocks through the screens, you get smaller and smaller rocks. It's a way to separate particles of different characteristics, magnetic characteristics, size, or whatever. And then I get to go to medical school. Then I wanted to go into general medicine because I wanted to be the expert on everything. I wanted to know everything. That's why I chose this field. And then I got interested in heart disease, and I got a second board certification in lipidology. And as it turns out, the first lipidologists were basically physicists who were good at electrophoresis, and they're the guys that figured out how to separate proteins, and that's how we started studying the lipid buildup and the walls of your arteries and what have you. So that ended up being a really good thing for me to get good at, because that's how we do a lot of lipidology now. So it's kind of funny how either we fall into things that work out well, or God is guiding us when we're not aware of it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I know.
Well, that's fascinating. So I'm unfamiliar with this. So electric charges on the lipids
sort of
can be detected, or
you create a electromagnetic field across a gel, and you put pressure on these proteins, and they all have some electrical charge, but they also have a certain size, and then different acetyl groups on the side that make them drag through the gel differently, and they basically separate themselves out, and then you stain the gel with a stain that'll pick up certain proteins, and you look for the ones that. So really, lipidology is not really a study of fat. It should have been called lipoproteinology, because you're studying the proteins that transport the fats. Because what cholesterol really is, and I'm sure the people watching this are really enjoying this part of the show.
Hey,
but what cholesterol really is,
it's style.
Okay. What cholesterol is a transport mechanism of fat. So you need fat. Some organs in your body got to have fat to survive. They can't live on sugar, protein, or whatever. So they have to have fat, but you can't put fat in the bloodstream because it would form globules and clog things up. And the guy that designed this figured that out. So he would coat the lipids with proteins. The proteins dissolve in the water, then the lipids are inside and they carry the fat around, and that's what cholesterol is. And so it's really the proteins that we study. And yeah, as it turned out, I happened to get good at that accidentally earlier in life.
That's very cool.
Because
and today, in your profession, what sort of doctor are you?
I do primary care, which is family medicine, and then my second board certifications in lipidology, all this geeky stuff I was talking about. And so in my previous practice in Tennessee, about half my practice was consults from like, cardiologists, cardiothoracic surgeons, they're figuring out, why does a 40-year-old woman need stents when her cholesterol is normal and stuff like that. And then I moved to Hilton Head, and now I do concierge medicine, and so people come to me. It's a good place for me because you have a lot of old people who have made some money that don't want to die.
Yep.
So it's a good fit. So I don't do referrals anymore. I don't accept consults from other doctors, but so I do primary care now with a focus on heart disease and vascular problems, that sort of thing.
And we got to ask, how is the COVID hitting you? Because that's the big thing.
I know.
That's the big thing, and you could take that to mean many different ways.
Yep.
Yeah, when David asked me to be on the show, I asked, so what are we going to talk about? And he said, oh, I don't know, and I would kind of appreciate to know what we, so I could sort of prepare. But I figured you'd probably ask about this because of my job, and yeah. First of all, I really don't want to talk about. I am so sick and tired of. I have people come to me for everything from cancer to heart disease, a common cold, and all they want to talk about is COVID. And I can't address their actual problem. So first of all, I'm sick and tired of this, and secondly, I don't know if you, I don't know if you read about there's a doctor in Minnesota who's like a state representative or whatever, and he made some comments on COVID that were not government approved, and he either lost his license or they went after him through the boards or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
so I really kind of have to be somewhat careful what I say. I think
Yeah.
I don't want to say anything specific. I'll say this, that I think when we look back on this, we track the total deaths in the United States from everything. They call it all-cause mortality, and we count 2018, 19, 20, 21, 22. I think there'll be a smooth curve. I don't think we're going to see a blip in this year. I don't think we'll have more total deaths. I could be wrong about that, but if I am wrong, it might be more suicides, alcoholism, driving, drug overdoses, and then cancers that we missed because we would stop doing our colonoscopy. I'm not sure we're going to see enough COVID deaths to change our total death rate, because the average age of death from this is older than the average age of death from everything else. So I don't know. I'm not sure. And also the other reason I don't want to talk about it is because I don't know what I'm talking about. I don't think anybody else does either. The numbers are so divergent. It depends on where you read, what you see. I don't understand. I'm really good at this. This is my full-time job, and I have no idea what's happening. So
okay, then then one quickie. As an observer, what are you observing? Like the people around.
What do you mean precisely?
Well,
Don and I have often talked about this. What's it like around your area? What are people doing? Like Don is the only guy walking around Palo Alto without a mask on.
Oh,
correct. Yeah. And is the hospital filled up with patients? That sort of thing. Observational.
Not filled up anywhere in the country, and they never were. Even New York didn't fill up hospitals. Our hospitals are empty because we aren't doing knee replacements and colonoscopies and all the routine stuff we normally do. So we've had to lay off nurses. ERs, a buddy of mine's an ER doc in New York, and he got laid off early. He worked for a group where they would contract out to hospitals, and his group laid off like half their docs because there just wasn't enough work. So no, the hospitals are we've had 3 deaths on Hilton Head. We have 40,000 old people all in one place. They're wealthy, they travel a lot, they fly a lot. We have 100,000 tourists a week, largely from New York and New Jersey and Connecticut. They should have blown up here. We've had 3 deaths. So, and the last one was the first week of April. So I don't know what this means, that we should have gotten hammered. When I saw the numbers out of Lombardy and it was a bunch of old people, I thought, oh my God, I'm going to lose half my practice. This is Hilton Head. I have an old practice here. So I'm not sure. That's another reason I just don't understand what's happening. I don't understand.
Well, I think it's fascinating that it seemed like very reasonable that using up hospital resources would have been a really big problem, but it's the opposite of that.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. I've got one where certain people text me. I have to answer. There we go.
Yep.
Sorry.
If we can help with anything there, just
I appreciate that. Yeah, thanks. A quick consult. I'm sorry. What were you saying? I'm really sorry.
I'm really surprised that it seemed reasonable that
Oh,
one
yeah.
of the problems of the virus is that it eats up a lot of hospital resources,
Well,
emergency rooms and beds and all.
no,
But it seems the opposite.
remember that, the first computer modeling that came out, we were expecting 2 to 5 million dead Americans in like 6 or 8 weeks. Those are the first computer models, and that's what they told Donald Trump. And when our president, our mayors, and our governors, and all these people freaked out, there was a reason they freaked out. The numbers were horrifying at first, and if we learn anything from this, which obviously I don't expect us to learn anything from this, but if we learn anything, I hope we learn that computer modeling is a waste of time. That because these guys were doing computer modeling on disease that was happening right in front of their face. They could measure anything they wanted to, talk to the actual patients, measure whatever tests they wanted to, and they were modeling that, and they were off by orders of magnitude. And then somebody else does a computer model and tells you what the weather is going to be like 500 years from now. This is nuts. Okay. Yep. So it's not really a medical matter. So my point though is that there is a reason people responded the way they did. And then after a while, one problem with government is that, I mean, like if I'm in business and I have a restaurant, we sell beer and chicken wings, and my wings don't sell well, I'm going to try different kinds of wings, because I'm losing money. Whereas once the government says, hey, everybody, here's our guidance, we suggest that you totally freak out, okay? And then things turn out to be not as bad as they thought. They just can't go back and say, hey, I was wrong.
Right.
Hey, I made a mistake. We're going to do this differently now. Or, just the nature of politics. I mean, you can't do that. You have to, blame your opposition or create a leverage against, but it doesn't make any sense to change course. So we kind of got stuck, I think. And here we are 8 months out. We went from trying to flatten the curve for 15 days to 8 months of chaos. And it looks stupid, but it's really not from the point of view of the guys in charge. I mean, there's a reason they're doing it this way, and I think they just kind of got caught.
Yep, I think that's the big problem. And there's also a crutch issue. So I'm a historian. I'm reading books. I'm writing a book set in the First World War, and I'm reading books about the First World War. One of the things that happened for the Russians is that they ran out of bullets very early on. They had a shell shortage. So every general said, well, I can't launch any more attacks until I get this amount of shells. And then they launch their attack. The attack fails because of other factors. And then they go back to say, well, the problem I didn't have is enough shells. So that's what's happening now with testing. It's like we get more cases because we're testing more. So we got to test more to get more cases. And it's like an endless loop.
That's true. And again, all these people aren't making decisions based on their own finances. They're making decisions based on popularity contests, getting voting, and trying to not to look stupid. And that does create a different set of decisions, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm guessing that the folks who predicted this, predicted the large number of deaths, had noticed some exponential growth relationship in the virus itself, and then extrapolated that.
I don't know where, and it doesn't really matter at this point, but right. If you're building a computer model, it really just depends on the factors you put into it, and you can put whatever you want. And so
I do that. I kind of do that. I build
so
computer
you
models
decide
all
what
the
you're
time.
looking for, and you go find it. So
I mean, the British were relying on something called the Imperial College model that has been apparently thoroughly debunked before the pandemic. Like all the scientists, like Sunepta Gupta over in Oxford, it's like, I don't know why you're using that. We've used it 4 times. Every time it's gotten the wrong number. And finally, during the course of around May, someone finally got a copy of it, went into the background and saw all the garbage code. And they're like, you can't even replicate your numbers from when you gave to Boris Johnson. We can't do that with your thing because your computer programming is so awful.
Well, and think of it from their perspective too, from the guys doing the computer modeling who are, they decide to search for something, then they go find it. I mean, the problem is just suppose it went the other way, and they say, oh, this won't be that bad. We'll have 5 or 10,000 deaths. Ends up being 5 million.
Yep.
Oh my God, right? So they're naturally going to shade on the side of catastrophe, just in case they don't look like an idiot. And you can understand that. And that may even be appropriate. But if you add a shade here and a shade there and a shade, you get these really big numbers really quickly.
Yep.
And I mean, there's a reason for that. So, and as it went on, the thing, we changed our perspective, but I'm just saying that our politicians couldn't change their perspective as quickly as the numbers did.
Well, I
and
mean,
as someone who does simulations, I recently did a pretty cool one. On the side of the guy who's doing the simulations, what we're trying to do is, take some mechanism. We can identify the mathematical properties of it, and then get the computer to cycle through that over and over and over again, see what's going to happen in the future. And it's a powerful thing because you say, I can explore all sorts of outcomes by changing my settings and just, run it on 4,000 different combinations and see what happens. And that's all that much work I don't have to do by hand. It's pretty cool. So, but the accuracy of this stuff, well, it's only going to be accurate over a tiny section.
mhm.
And
if
that.
If it's altered by human behavior too, then, shoot. I mean, okay, so-and-so wears a mask. That's awesome. Well, what if she takes it off? Well, let's put it back on. What if 100 million people do that? Well, it just becomes
Mhm.
unwieldy, right? So there's just too many variables. And what they're trying to do is very difficult. But there is a reason this was this far off. And again, I don't really criticize anybody. I can see how it happened. I could see myself doing the same thing if I were in their position.
Mhm.
But
Right. And there are some systems that are naturally what we call chaotic. And for those of you who aren't familiar with it, that means that the literal definition of it is when a very small change in an input causes a great change in an output. So for instance, if you're say shooting a gun and it ricochets off a light pole, it could ricochet off in any old direction, depending on the slightest change in aim. That's a chaotic system. And it's very, very difficult, impossible to predict at that point. And I don't know if chaos is involved here.
People are, so it's the same thing, right?
Yeah. To that, yeah, certainly.
Right. All right, can we please talk about something else?
That's it. We're done.
Something less controversial. Let's talk about the election.
Oh, okay, yeah. This should take 5 minutes. Yeah.
So I think I've heard some stuff today that confirms for me, I think Trump's going to blow it out. There's been certain, today the thing I was reminded of is that the universities are closed down. And what this means is all those Democratic poll workers, the universities are naturally basically Democrat poll machines. They go in there, they round up all the students to go door knocking. They do all these things to help them out to do working on their campaigns and basically generate, it's a captive population that the Democrats use to exploit to their advantage, and they're closed. All these guys are stuck at home. They're not going out helping out all the stuff. So all these early Trump voting, that's why we're seeing some of the numbers we're doing.
It is going to be weird because a lot of the college kids aren't in the college towns, so you may not see the dominant Democrat turnout in places like Madison, Wisconsin, and
I went to school there.
Oh, did you? Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and also you do all these registrations of those Democrat students. We were talking to Max Ledoux a few shows ago, and he was talking about why New Hampshire sometimes goes the way it does. And he says, well, the problem is you get all these college kids coming in from out of state, and they normally a very Republican college town suddenly becomes Democrat central because there's 20,000 Democrats there. Well, we're not going to have those people there anymore. The Democrats have done a lot of shooting themselves in the foot. And that's going to be coming into play, and we're going to see some weird results in places that we never saw it before.
Well, it's a happy thought. I hope you're right. I'm not sure of the impact of that. Maybe.
Well, how are things over there in Hilton Head?
Well, in terms of the election, you mean? How
yard signs, that sort of thing. What do you see?
Hilton Head's a weird place. 85% of people here live in gated communities. And there are all these really restrictive HOAs. So you can't have yard signs. In fact, if you're selling your house, you can't put a for sale sign along because that might make the neighborhood look a little bit.
Really?
So I don't know. And we are sort of insulated from a lot of stuff here. But the election, still, this election does seem unusually hostile and vicious. But I just really think, well, first of all, I don't think the Democrats are being hostile and vicious because they think Donald Trump is a jerk. I really don't think that's the reason. And I think if you think that, then you're missing kind of a big picture here. This election's clearly not about Joe Biden. I mean, nobody cares what he thinks about anything. And I don't think it's about Donald Trump either. I think the Democrats are acting vicious, not because they don't like Donald Trump, but they're acting vicious because Democrats have become more vicious. And that's just the way, and I think that this another thing, I don't think this election is important as people are making that to be, at least not long term. 5, 10 years, maybe it matters, but beyond 10 years, I don't think it does that much because, you know, while I think what's important is that the American culture has changed generally, and the American left has changed specifically. And it's undergone enormous changes in the last, say, 40 years or so, and these cultural changes are a lot more important than the election between these two guys right now, because I think that when I say the left has changed and Democrats have changed, I don't mean that they've got a few wackos in Congress like AOC or Bernie Sanders, whoever, because really they've always had a few of those if you think about it. I think what's different is the Democrat voters. You know, that this is different, and a few things different. First of all, I don't think American Democrats they're not Marxists, they're not socialists, and even Democrats who call themselves socialists, like Sanders, they don't really talk about, you know, central government control or ownership of the means of production and other things that you and I would associate with socialism.
Right.
It's about control, you know, and they just simply want control, and they've convinced large numbers of people to grant them control over their lives because they feel they have no hope without the Democrat Party, and that's not so easy to do. I mean, if you think, you know, like Woodrow Wilson, and I'm sorry, my brain jumps around like this. I'm sorry, but it's probably not what you asked.
So do we.
I guess that's the nature of the show, though, right?
Yeah.
All right. So Woodrow Wilson understood that the U.S. Constitution was, I mean, directly at odds with leftism. It just didn't fit, and the American personality or ethos or whatever, you know, the American dream and all that, it just didn't really fit with leftism. In fact, he even said that the purpose of schools was to make boys as different from their fathers as possible. That was the whole purpose of schools as far as Woodrow Wilson was concerned. So he understood that the American character didn't fit with leftism, and FDR carried this forward, and they understood that they were going to find ways to institute leftism that didn't involve votes, right? And so and they understood that any group of people like Americans who are so obsessed, almost fetishistic, if you want, if that's a word, about personal liberty and the pursuit of happiness and all that, that they would push back against the jealousy and resentment that's necessary to build a base for leftism, right? So, so one way that, I mean, one way they did this was they like Wilson tried to start a bureaucracy and have a lot of decisions made by bureaucrats, and you'd have highly trained people, highly educated, helping you make decisions of what crops to plant, what different times and all this, and we would all benefit from the knowledge of the ages through the bureaucrat and the bureaucrat. Now the problem is bureaucrats are not elected, but that was kind of the whole point. They didn't have to stand for election, but it's not even that simple. I think if you think of Act of War by Sun Tzu, you know, which a book that I think is a bit overquoted, but one part of it that really struck with me is when he said that the way you win a war is it's not killing more of the enemy's soldiers or burning down more of their cities. The way you win a war is by convincing the enemy that there's absolutely no hope that they could possibly win. No matter what happens, they cannot win. So you go to your opponent and you remove hope. Well, leftists don't do that to their opponents. They do that to their supporters. They try to convince their supporters that there is no hope without the Democrat Party, and you know, you can't possibly succeed without us. We may be scary, but the other guys are worse, and you know, you should vote for us. And you know, they tell women that men make more money than they do, even if they're better at their jobs. They tell blacks that, oh, you could never possibly get into college without the assistance of benevolent white people. You know, they tell everybody that we're going to die of global warming unless you vote Democrat. They tell students that there's a new normal, the decreased standard of living. They remove hope, and they even, you know, with the modern focus on, you know, all the racist stuff that's so trendy now. You know, they'll say, hey, you, Bob, you're you're not hardworking and successful, you're privileged, you know, and you, Joe, you're not lazy and broke, you're oppressed, you know, so they're removing agencies. It's not, you don't matter here, you know, there's nothing you can do. So now we got a group of kids marching the streets because they think the way to make their lives better is not by improving themselves, but by altering the behavior of their betters, you know, by through politics, basically. And so they're basically trying to scare people into conceding control over their own lives, which is an understandable tactic. But when you do that, when you remove hope from that many people, you're killing the engine of growth for a whole country. Because basically what makes America so successful is everybody down the street thinks they can do something better than somebody else. And
yeah.
So when you remove hope, that just basically kills our golden goose. And also you take away our chance at being happy. So I think they realize, you know, FDR and Wilson, who began all this, that because of the natural optimism of Americans, that they simply wouldn't vote for leftism. So they had to find ways to get around that. One way is with, you know, bureaucrats, and then the media control is very important. Judges become very important because anybody that votes for a bill that promotes leftism won't run re-election, so you have to have judges make the laws now. Which and then of course bureaucrats, media, and judges, none of them are elected, you know, and so then the problem with that though is, and when judges become that important, then the presidency becomes really important because he appoints judges. Mm-hmm. And then I think we've gotten to the point now where Democrats realize that the election of the president is too important to be left to chance. I mean, you just can't allow that to go incorrectly. So then they kind of had to build a voter base, you know, and so they, you know, the Immigration Act of '65, which I think was an absolutely earth-shattering event. We started, instead of bringing highly trained, highly educated Europeans who had a similar culture to America, we bring in, since then it's over 65 million immigrants from third world countries with no education, no training, very different cultures from ours that wouldn't assimilate very well. Mm-hmm. And the Democrats told not to assimilate anyway because our culture is evil, right? And then our educational system has been built to create Democrat voters. I mean, anybody under 30 or so has been immersed in leftism since kindergarten. That's just starting. We're just starting to see the impact of that. Wait till everybody under 50 is like that, you know. I mean, and then minority groups. They basically told every minority group, blacks and everybody else, that you cannot succeed without Democrats. So you add up immigration, education, and then what they've done to minority groups. They've basically built a voting base. They understood they didn't have a voting base. They made one themselves, designed to give them perpetual control over national elections. And I think it's going to work. But the problem is that this has gotten to the point where we're pretty soon we're going to have gangs of thugs. If you train kids that they're right and they're always right, we groups of thugs in the streets beating up people that don't agree with them. I mean, that's where fascism comes from. And so I think that and I think some of the older Democrats like Pelosi and Schumer have started to understand what they're up against, that if Biden wins, this is all not going to go away. I mean, it's going to be hard to stuff this genie back in the bottle. So I think that the election's not as important as we think. I think that the underlying cultural changes that have led us to this point are vital. I think they ain't seen nothing yet. I mean, just wait 10 years. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this election matters, but not as much as everything else that's going on, I think. And I'm sorry, that's probably a little bit more than what you wanted.
No, that's exactly what I wanted.
Let's talk about hog farming.
No. Somebody, that's beautiful. Somebody transcribe that sucker. That's not.
No, don't do that.
No, that is well done, well presented. It's consistent all over. Wow.
Okay.
Wow. Folks, right here.
Yeah, never mind.
Wow. Yeah, well, he's probably up there by now.
I can tell you that yes, I agree with some of those trends you're talking about, but I also know once going back to my historian stuff, I've seen that all happen before. 99 times out of 100, it fails.
Eventually, yeah, but a lot of bad things happen in between.
Yeah, that's true. Right? There's a lot of bad things.
So my point, so when people say, okay, we need to elect Trump to preserve the American Republic, I don't think you're paying attention here. I don't think a lot of things have to happen to get back. And again, they've built a voter base. So it's not like you can vote out a Democrat president we don't like and we'll get back to where we were. Mm-hmm. No, that's not how that. So I mean, I'm not saying that America is over exactly, but I'm saying that it's okay. Another silly metaphor. So if you watch a bobsled race in the Olympics, you got the guys pushing their little sled along, and then they all jump in the sled and pull their little handles in, put their heads down, and they go around that first turn, and then you're watching them all these other turns. Okay, So at that point, a lot of things could happen from an historian's perspective, right? You could say that they could set a world record, they could have a bad race, they could flip the sled and finish on their heads, they maybe have a mediocre time, but you know where they're ending up. They can't get partway down that track and say, you know, I don't like how let's go back to the beginning and start over. I mean, they're committed. They've reached the point of no return, and I think that we're somewhere along there. And so, I mean, you're right that this is likely to blow up because I don't think the Democrats can control what they've built. But it's going to be a messy process, and I don't think we can simply take a step back and go back to what we were before. We're gonna have to find something new and build something else.
Yeah.
That's a good, what you said just there, I think is really profound, that the Democrats cannot control what they've built.
I think they know.
I'm convinced.
I think the higher ones know.
Yeah.
I'm convinced the Democrat Party organization, the party organization that operates as a business sort of thing, I think that's a mess. I think that's like some chaotic, drunken mess right now, because their decisions don't make any sense.
Yeah, you're right, but it's not quite fair, because if you think about it, I mean, the Republican side, the conservative side is based on a certain set of principles, and really a pretty simple set of principles. So there is something that unifies us, and we argue about stuff, but whereas what is the underlying principle of the Democrat Party? Really, it's the acquisition of power, and it doesn't really matter how they do that exactly, which means there is going to be some just crazy, a wide spectrum of, I mean, you know, you've got union members who ride Harleys on the weekends. You've got sociologists, feminists from Madison, Wisconsin. You've got all these other, you know, they don't even like each other, you know, so you're right. It looks like a strange organization, like nobody's in charge, but that's just the nature of their business. And that's just the way it's going to be.
I meant the decisions they're making, like for instance, running 29 people for president.
Yeah.
Okay. Clearly
choosing Joe Biden and Kamala Harris out of that.
And then of those. Okay.
Yeah.
There's some basic functional mechanism that's thoroughly broken down. And normally the party organization would help with these things. You know, they would narrow it down. They'd say, you know, we're only going to have, you know, 3 people in the primaries or something. They would normally have this under control. There's nothing under control.
There's nothing underneath. There's no underlying principles or there's nothing they all agree on.
Yeah.
Right.
So it just becomes a power struggle, which is going to be chaotic.
Right. So there's the ideology part, and then there's the power part that's making things happen. And they're different, right?
Yeah.
Because like I said, there's very little in the way of underlying ideology here.
Yeah.
As opposed to, you know, the Republican side, oh yeah, we can, you know, the ideology on the Republican side is pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
You know, liberty, Constitution, you know, all good.
Yeah.
Right.
Now I have seen some other signs of hope. I was on a earlier live stream earlier today with a guy who's from a real nerd area of like popular entertainment. He brought me on because he's like, you're a conservative guy. I want to ask you about this canceling of Chris Pratt and some other stuff that was happening. So I went on and we were talking, and then at the end he's like, hey, can you stay around after the show? And I'm like, sure. And he's like, the first thing I want to say is I'm voting for Trump. I can't let my people know that I hate Biden. I do not want this to happen. I hate cancel culture, and I know a lot of nerds have been canceled, hit by cancel culture.
And you're right, there are signs. I mean, I don't mean to sound hopeless. First of all, I think that what comes next might be great. You know, I don't know. But first of all, the educational system has got real problems right now. I mean, there's a lot of people that go to college and pay $80,000 a year now to watch videos on their laptop, and that's not long-term sustainable. Our public schools, a lot of parents are realizing that their kids are getting a better education when they don't go. And if our educational system is either destroyed or damaged, that would be a big setback for the Democrats. If there's a foreign war, you know, if China invades France or whatever, you know, something.
Taiwan would be the place they invade.
I think that Americans would band together around that. That would be a variable, it'd be difficult to predict. And part of this may be just normal, to a certain degree, infighting. I mean, I don't think America's ever really had a fascist movement like this before, with Antifa and Black Lives Matter roaming the streets.
Yes, the 1930s you did.
Is that right?
Silver shirts.
Oh yeah, yeah. The eagle.
And an actual genuine Nazi party. I actually just finished reading a book about it, about like the back when the Anti-Defamation League was actually a good organization,
Right.
and how they set up a spy organization on the West Coast and worked with the Hollywood moguls, because they all hated the German consul there, who was like
Right.
preventing from sales. So they all worked together to quash the Nazis on the West Coast, and had a whole dossier of information ready to go for the FBI when the war was started, versus the East Coast, where there was all kinds of problems.
Yeah, and it may be that, I mean, we don't, one reason we're having trouble getting along may be that we're wealthy and it's time of peace, and
Yeah.
a time of war may unite us the way it often does when widely spaced factions create huge coalitions to deal with an outside threat. But I just don't see either one of those things happen. I don't see our educational establishment being significantly altered, and I don't see a major foreign threat. We have the most dominant military the world has ever seen. So I don't see either one of those happening, but there are things that could happen that could change course. But I still think we're on that bobsled run and our destination's been decided. So we got to decide what comes next, I think.
Yeah, I think a terrorist nukes New York, for example, would be a big thing. 5 million Democrats vaporized in a day. Like, they would change their tune immediately.
Lord help us. Yeah, but you're right. Things happen. Look through history. Things happen.
Yeah.
So yeah. And I've been doing posts on the Trump rallies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
and
I see those,
those have been really interesting. There's a lot of those are very big. There's a lot of happy people.
Yeah.
A lot of joyous people.
Well, that's the one problem with conservatives is we're happy, right? I mean, because you can't be a liberal and be happy. I mean, and that's one they all want change because they don't like the way things are now. So that's why the guys like Wilson and FDR and all these people, they try to make people unhappy, to make them fearful, to lose hope. That's a Democrat, because those are the radicals, and that's why it's always been student groups that led to the radical changes. So. Yeah, so you're conservative. There's a bunch of boring, happy people there, and it's not really inspiring for a political movement. Typically, I think Trump does a nice job harnessing that, but traditionally, that's not really the roots of a radical movement.
Yep.
Right. And just today there was a Kamala rally, maybe another one later, like 6 people there. It was more than 6, I'm sure, but there were 6 in the camera view, but I think there was at least 15.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who she is or what she believes in. Joe Biden doesn't matter. Again, Trump is.
I've seen a few Biden stuff. He's okay. He's still trying to be a Clinton era Democrat in his thing. So even if he wins, I'm not as terrified as I initially was.
That's because it's a general election. He's tacking to the center. I mean, first of all, he's not in control of what's going on right now. I mean. I can't believe that that's really who their voters. I mean, because the Democrats, who do they hate? Rich old white men, right? And they have all these people running, and they chose Biden. So in the primary, of course, he sounds like Bernie Sanders because he's trying to win against a bunch of leftists, and then in the general, he sounds more like Bill Clinton. But neither one of those has anything to do with how he'll govern, and he will govern. The only way I know how he's going to govern briefly. And I think this stuff with his son's laptop is really going to help the Democrats make a change earlier on than they would have. And once Harris takes over, it'll be the same people running things. I don't think it'll matter that much. But I wouldn't listen to what he's saying and think, oh, that's what Joe Biden thinks. Well, no, it doesn't matter. He's running for office as a Democrat. Yeah,
that was true. That's
the problem that Democrats have, is they can't be honest about what they believe, because they know, just like Wilson and FDR, they know they won't get votes. So what they say has nothing to do with what they actually believe. They can't do that, and that makes it complicated if you're mentally compromised, because everything you're saying has all these levels of, you can't just come out and say what you think. So I wouldn't read too much into what he's saying.
Okay.
I think Obama was the same thing. They would fill his teleprompters with lovely stuff and platitudes and such, and had nothing to do with what he was really about, what he was really doing. In fact, part of the skill is an actor's skill, where you're you're dissociating your personal feelings from what you're saying. And he had that down. I mean, if he thought about that for a moment, he was like say, no, but he didn't. He was being an actor.
First of all, Trump is good at that too. I mean, he's a very good actor. I mean, he was good on TV. Not everybody good on TV. He had a very successful TV show. I know that it was more successful in his years. And the other thing is, I never found Obama to be a compelling speaker. I never understood. He didn't. I just didn't. Now off teleprompter, he was horrific. Which Trump is. He's not good off teleprompter. But even he just sounded arrogant and detached, and it, like Bill Clinton, you just couldn't help but love the guy. I mean, he'd speak, so, oh wow, what a swell guy! I'd love to have a beer with him. I never got that sense from Obama. So I don't. I hear about how brilliant he was in communication and stuff. I just don't see it.
I think it was more hypnotic than.
Maybe so.
No, they had the teleprompter with just this exact rhythm, and his face would, and they had the port and starboard, stereo teleprompters, and he'd go between one and the other, and that rhythm was the rhythm of the left and right, and the rhythm of the words going by. That downright hypnotic. I
thought he just had good speechwriters.
They just filled it up with those platitudes. That's all it was. Fill it up with platitudes, get the rhythm, get the back and forth, and the mellow voice. You're there.
Again, I think that they've been building a voter base through all these different techniques I talked about, and it doesn't matter so much who the guy is. I mean, imagine, okay, Biden's going to win about half the vote, give or take a little bit. Who could they put on a ticket that wouldn't win half the vote?
Right.
Who on earth would that be? If they can win votes with Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden, the mind boggles, So Obama's speech and all that, it doesn't matter as much, I think, as we think. This is more about something they've been building culturally for some decades.
Although I think if Tulsi Gabbard and Marianne Williamson, that would have been interesting. Yeah.
Yep.
They can both actually talk, and they're not immediately unlikable. I mean, you're right. That would have been interesting.
But they're also not connected with the Democratic Party organization, as far as the corruption and all. So I don't think that would work.
That's true. Although I don't really think Trump's associated with the Republican Party structure either. I mean, I said once he was the first independent president we ever had, and somebody mentioned that Jackson. But I don't think that.
Good way to put it.
There's a couple other independent presidents that were kind of like smaller parties back in the 19th century that I can think of.
Who?
Some of the Whig presidents. I mean, it's the Whig party.
Oh, Whig was a major. That's
yeah, but there's certainly some of the I can't remember, Pope or something like that. There's a couple guys who are kind of more definitely like, it's like I'm the president and of the Whigs, but the Democrat Party has got full control of everything else other than me. There was a guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Republican Party is founded. They won the presidential election like a year later, right? You could call that when Lincoln won. That might have been an independent, I guess. But that's a stretching it, though. My point is, we had two major party structures, and Trump didn't belong to either one and wasn't liked by either one. He got no support from either party, and he still won. And I think that's made it difficult for, with the Democrats' full-on assault that started before he was even inaugurated. Part of the problem he had was he wasn't being protected by a bunch of buddies in Congress that he served with in Congress for 30 years that knew him and liked him. He just came in and took the job they all wanted and blew them all up in the process. He had nobody on his side. And that made
there were a few, you know what? There were people on his side, and one guy, another lawyer I watch on his blog, a vlog or whatever, and he's like, one of Trump's problems, he has been very bad to his loyalists, and he has people he's brought people in from the Republic because the party told him he should, instead of getting people who are actually loyal to him. I think a lot of the crap that we had to deal with would never have happened if he had made Chris Christie chief of staff and not Reince Priebus. I don't think there would be a Flynn problem at all if Chris Christie were chief of staff.
That may be, although Trump does, I mean, he uses you as long as he needs you and he gets somebody else. I'm not sure he's really loyal to anybody. And one of the reasons he may not have support of the party is they know that about him. But I'll tell you, I don't know.
I like your point. I think it's an important point. I think he is. He was definitely a party outsider. He was a political outsider, and he was a party outsider.
Right.
So I think that's a valid statement to say he's the first independent president in a long time, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's yeah, I think it's right.
Okay. Thank you.
I guess George Washington would be the first independent president.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Anyways, I mean, we've been talking for an hour here, and this is probably a good time to end on a good energy note.
Okay.
And for those of you who are waiting for one of us to mute our video and go off and do something, didn't happen.
I've returned a couple of texts, so does that count?
Yeah. Well, we have as our next week's guest is going to be Mule Skinner Weasel Wrangler, so that should be a fun one.
That should be. I want to see. I want to see that.
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to see him wrangle.
That's gonna be.
Yeah, we'll see if he can wrangle some weasels for us. I do intend to occasionally go after someone with a bit more high profile on the site, but I think Don's idea of that we go through our subscribers list on the group channel is the best thing to do right now. Get people who are actually watching and interested in.
So if you're watching,
and yeah, if you've been watching and you're join the group on Ricochet, and yeah, this has been a great time. And thank you, Dr. Bastiat, for coming on.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, I rambled a little bit. That's how.
No. This is. We should go over find Mr.
We're going to transcribe that.
Stealing the ramble from him.
Oh, thanks for having me. I very much appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye.